Hello and welcome back to the RevOps Show. If you've done any sort of build out for a client, you'll know there's a whole process for checking to make sure things are running how they should be. Is the plumbing correct? The good old UAT and QAT. Doug and Jess get into what exactly needs to happen during both tests, who should be performing them, and where people tend to turn this testing into just using. It's an upbeat and very exciting episode, so let's get started.
Jess.
Doug.
For those of you not listening, this was actually take two for our opening. We had gone through a whole Jess always seems surprised that this is how we start the show. So she was clearly ready this time.
Very much. It is Friday afternoon. It is a Friday.
It is Friday afternoon. It's as Friday afternoon as you can get. It feels like I know this is not going to be like to listeners. This is just their gap was a few weeks ago, but it feels like it's been forever since we talked RevOps Show.
It does. It does. It's been crazy. We had an inbound.
We had an inbound. And so this whole episode is going to be totally out of whack because we had the inbound episode post while we were at inbound.
Yep.
And then I think there's 3 episodes or something that are going to go up before you. So like it's, I mean, some of them already gone up because someone kept canceling these. I'm not going to say who.
I don't know who that person was.
There you heard it.
There's their guest. There's their guest star.
Yep. Yep. So Jess, I have some very good news for you. I was actually talking to a candidate today. She said she's been binging the RevOps Show.
Yeah.
Said she's a big fan. I told her we're super excited about that because that means we've got 2 now. We've got your mom.
Yep.
And her. So
my mom on her 999 devices. And the candidate.
Yep. So a lot of excitement there. What was your favorite thing about inbound, Jess?
Oh my God. Well, so I think this one seemed crazier, and I don't know if it's just because it's been so long since we've been back. I think my favorite thing was getting to meet the team in person. We had a lot of the team that we had met before there, and getting to kind of see everybody live and in person and get to know their personalities a little bit better. And yeah, I enjoyed that. What about you?
My favorite part was staying up till 3:30 in the morning to make sure that you had company before you had to.
Oh my God. I blocked out the fact I didn't go to sleep on Thursday night.
And I recall, I can't remember if that came up on the RevOps Show where it was, but I know that I brought it up to you and you're like, that ain't happening. I'm going to bed early. And if you recall, my response to you was challenge accepted.
That was your response. So you won.
I did.
Congratulations.
Win. I won conclusively.
But you were also exhausted. See, you paid for that as well because you were also exhausted. You probably weren't as exhausted as I was, but you were also exhausted.
Well, see, I don't know that that's true because you were exhausted. You had to stumble through an airport, get on a plane, be disoriented on the flight. You got home, etc. I had to go to 2 meetings.
Oh, I forgot you had meetings on Friday.
I had to go work the floor. Then I went to lunch with a group of people. Then I had to come back. Then I had to get to the hotel, pull everything out before the whole Obama crowd, 12,000 people went running to find their thing. So yeah, I wasn't sure that I was going to actually make it to the airplane. Was not 100% sure. It was fascinating. No, so my favorite part. I mean, I agree with you. It was. I'm trying to figure out where the time went.
Right. Same.
But it was nonstop. I do think that some of it is we just like it's been so long since you've had to manage that type of mind space, if you will. But my favorite part was and it actually has been pretty consistent. It's, you know, there's an old saying that says, nothing good ever happens after midnight.
There is a saying.
And,
Yep.
and I've learned the exception. Nothing good happens after midnight unless it's in the Westin lobby during the week of inbound.
That's when all the best things happen.
That is when all the best things happen. Actually, they begin to happen around 11:30. That's what I noticed. About 11:30, that's when the good stuff happens. And that's because, you know, as they say, the extra mile has less company. Right. And that's where, you know, 11:30 is when, you know, and by the way, here's the question. We brought our new team there. Young group.
A lot of youngins.
A lot of youngins. How did the oldest person on our team outlast everybody?
So to be fair, I technically outlasted you on Thursday because I didn't go to sleep. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Except you didn't do anything on Friday. So
I did not. Okay,
So-
fine. Fair. Okay.
now so I'll say, how come the oldest two people?
Right. Exactly.
Right. So anyways, enough about inbound. What are we talking about today, Jess?
So I have what has been a hot button topic for us over the past few weeks because we've had several launches that we've been managing. And so what I want to talk today about is QAT and UAT of a new system. And I think those two terms get used interchangeably frequently. So I want to talk about kind of the best way to manage that, where people go wrong, and kind of share some of our learnings that we've had going through these couple of launches we've gone through.
We've only launched a couple
Several.
all year. So I know one of your questions was, what is the difference between UAT and QAT?
Yep.
And I think that's rather obvious. One has a U.
There it is.
And the other
there
has
it is,
a Q.
folks. This is what we get for recording on a Friday.
I was told, by the way, actually, I've had a couple people you know what? We have more than 2 fans because I'm just remembering now. We had a few people at Inbound that came up and was
if you recall, you're the famous one.
I'm the famous one, but that was HubSpot Academy too.
HubSpot Academy.
Yeah.
We had 2 people walk up to Doug and tell him that he's the famous one. I immediately told them to stop.
So I was told today by the candidate that she really likes our banner.
Okay.
I was told we were told by a couple people at Inbound that they liked our banter, and someone actually commented on one of our episodes on LinkedIn that he's pretty certain that I only say these things to get under your skin, and my response was, I can't say that's wrong.
That's a very accurate statement. I'm very aware of that.
And I didn't realize until I said it. Did you know that U and Q rhyme?
They do. They do.
You can't do Q without U. Alrighty.
Yep.
In fairness,
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about UAT, QAT, we need to acknowledge up front that we are not. This is not the typical standard where UAT, QAT necessarily comes from. So you know, to some degree, there is our bet, because you know, UAT is a more than anything else is a software development piece, and you know what? I think that we used to look at UAT and QAT. I think we used to look at them. I mean, you said people confuse the two.
Oh, we used to look at them in the same thing.
Yeah, I think we used to.
We used the term interchangeably, and it meant the same thing to us, whether we were using UAT or QAT. Yes, that wasn't throwing shade. We did that too.
So this won't surprise you. I got a bunch of parallel, somewhat conflicting, somewhat complementary thoughts on this. Okay. You know, at its simplest level, you know, QAT is quality assurance testing. UAT is user acceptance testing. Mm-hmm. So QAT is done internally from our perspective. UAT is done externally. So we do the QAT. When we're doing it, it's QAT. When the customer, client, user is doing it, it's UAT.
And for us, I think to just highlight further the difference of that, QAT is us checking, is the system working the way we expected based on the build. UAT would be having a user go in and go through the way they would use it and kind of try to break it, is how I usually instruct them.
Yeah, I think though, so I think differently.
Okay.
So I think UAT is a subset of QAT. So I would say UAT is the user testing it for acceptance based upon the intent of the build.
Okay. Yeah, I can get behind that. Yeah.
QAT is more than that. It's so UAT to me, especially if you're talking about, you know, a major CRM, like a major shift, like a major upgrade in what you're doing, or a migration, that should be based on defined user stories, defined scenarios.
Yep.
Use cases. I'm sorry, use cases, scenarios, and the reason is, you know, we joke around and we say the goal at UAT, what we want you to do is we want you to go in and break shit.
Yep.
The danger is when you're talking, especially about a something like a CRM implementation, marketing automation implementation, et cetera. If I want to find something that doesn't work, I can find something that doesn't work.
Oh yeah. 100%.
I can find a scenario. Well, it doesn't do this. Okay. Well, how often does that happen? Well, it's never happened. Okay, great. Right. And one of the places as a provider where I think UAT goes wrong, and it ends up hurting the user too, is, you know, done improperly, it leads to the single biggest and most common fail point in any project, and that is when you move into the infinite project.
Yep.
And so, you know, user acceptance testing is not generating iterations, and it's easy to generate iterations. User acceptance testing is, does this do what it was specified to do?
Yep.
Right. Because if it doesn't do something and it wasn't specified, then you might make an argument that whoever was responsible for specifying screwed up.
Right.
Right. And you might argue otherwise, but you're, you know, every time you improve a system, every time you improve software, I joke about this all the time. I said, you know, if I told you I've got the greatest piece of software, everyone loves it, but by the way, it's so good, we're not supporting it anymore.
Right.
Would you buy it? No, you wouldn't buy it, right? Because
right.
software has to be, it's always
right.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's where UAT, that's where user acceptance testing, from my perspective at least, goes wrong. QAT is thinking about, okay, was this done right? Even though it might not be technically a part of what that use case was. So, you know, when you're setting up, you know, email structures or underlying, you know, so there's, you know, it like for me, it's, you know, does this meet the specifications? If you go into an instance that we build, does it meet our standards?
Right.
Our standards as a whole should be higher than the UAT standard. So we should be thinking about things beyond just, you know, just the defined use cases.
Yeah. And I think one place too on the user acceptance testing, and I think you were kind of alluding to some of this, is the other place where I think that goes wrong is around when people start testing edge cases or the exceptions. We don't build to the edge case. We don't build to the exceptions. We build to the rule. And so I think that's the place too where, like you said, it's dangerous to say go in and break it, because okay, well now I'm just going to test all of these one-offs that occasionally or rarely happen, and now we're like making adjustments to that versus making adjustments to what the usual MO is.
I agree.
So the next thing I want to dig into is kind of who should be doing the UAT and the QAT. So we talked about we do the QAT because we're the ones who set up the instance, built it. Who should be doing the UAT?
Well, the user.
To the end user. So if it's sales, it should be sales reps. If it's a marketing automation,
so when you have a project team
Mhm.
set up, who is responsible? Who's responsible on the, so in our case, on the customer side for what's involved? Again, I mean, user acceptance testing is you're trying to find, you're hitting on the main elements of what's happening. Does this do what it was supposed to do? Piloting is where you go to the full end user with a group where it's designed to find things that are broken. Yeah, I mean, if everyone's quote unquote UATing, then then we just call that using.
The question behind the questions, we get that frequently. Is it the main point of contact who should do the UAT? Should we let a sales rep loose doing it? Should we have a sales manager do it? And that's on the sales side. I get similar questions on service as well.
So I think it's situational, and again, I think that if you build a new stadium, you go through a process of building the plumbing, and then you test the plumbing to see, okay, when we flush the toilet, does it work?
Right.
When we turn on the sink, does the water come on? And you go through each sink and you go through each toilet and you do that. That's akin to user acceptance testing. But then, 2 days before opening day, you have a group of people come in and you flush all the toilets and turn all the sink, all the knobs on all at the same time, because when multiple, so user acceptance testing is defined scenario testing. Again, you should be meeting the use cases. Now it gets out of, there's, you're going to a one of the things for us that happens with users, we know what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And so sometimes something is missing that we won't notice is missing because we know what to do. Or in user acceptance testing, they might go, well, I got confused here. I had to think. Right. I had to find, we'll move this here.
Sure.
Right. That's really what user, is this working the way we intended it to work? It's really not, so it's not a full try to break it. And again, the danger is I can break. Trust me, I can break just about anything.
I'm well aware.
So who should? I think that, the reality is that should be determined. And here's a process improvement. Everybody, you're hearing a process improvement live. Who's going to do the UAT should be defined at the point that you're probably building. That's when you should have defined who's doing UAT. Okay. And you could probably have, level 1 UAT, which is, which is a high level person who's fully involved. You might go to somebody who's more, it's like, if you think about, we're working with a company, IT's heavily involved. Yep. They own the project. Like, I might have first UAT by IT, second UAT by the sales lead for the build,
right?
Service lead for the build, and then maybe have a third UAT with 1 or 2 actual end users. But those end users need to be briefed on what they're supposed to be doing. Again, I don't think that UAT is a blind element. If I come in and I just, one of the elements of a UAT is you should be clear on what is, what are you testing? What are the tests?
Yeah.
Right. So we want to, we're supposed to be able to create a contact, turn that contact into an opportunity, have it automatically associate to the company so that we can send an email. And then when this happens, a deal gets created. That's use case already.
Right.
Right. So in my perspective is the vast majority of UATs should pass, because in what we're doing to build, there is a little bit of your building for the test.
Sure. Sure.
But that also gets to what Agile is all about. Agile is about, we're building for use. We're not building for something else. And so, what are the things that we're looking at? What are the key failure points? Remember, you're getting to launch, you're getting to whatever your level of complete is. If you don't have a defined level of what you're testing, then you're not going to be able to tell the difference between an enhancement and a fix.
Yeah.
Right. And every project has to have an end. That's why waterfalls blow up, right? Why is Agile powerful when it's done right? Well, because the project's over at the end of the sprint.
Yep. Right.
And it's built so that the iteration happens next. Right. And so,
yep.
You're building to a release date. That's what Agile, that's why Agile came, because you had to have a release date. Hey, our user conference is set up. We've got 15,000 people coming to the user conference. We have to launch at the user conference. By the way, in case you haven't noticed it, there's been some scope creep in Agile, because increasingly user conferences are, coming soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, anyways, that's the danger. Again, that's where you fall into, UAT done improperly. You fall into the infinite project. The other thing too is, remember, Dharmesh Shah had a great tweet or LinkedIn post. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was both. And he said, there's nothing wrong with building software that has a strong opinion. As a matter of fact, that's the whole point, isn't it? Right. So the business process, our prime directive, the business process must drive the technology. The technology should never dictate the business process. And so, in defining the user stories and defining the use cases and defining the scenarios, you're also defining the trade-offs. The whole point of the system design is you're making choices, right? So if you UAT or QAT, if you test outside of those choices, then I'm going to, we've made the decision that we would rather, as a matter of fact, today, I we were going over a design, and I said, look, what, exit criteria are important. We want to ensure that we've got good, clean data. We want to make sure things are kept up to date. And so, we made the recommendation that deal stage should not be editable. Deals move based on criteria that are automated. That's how deals move.
Yeah.
Now, is someone going to say, hey, here's an exception? Yeah, there's an exception.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a group of people that do have edit access. So those people, so if there's an exception, then that can be moved.
Yeah.
Right? Is there, would I like it so that it can be moved if there's an exception, but not moved if there's not an exception, but the person who's doing it, right? I would love for that to happen.
Right.
I would love to have all of it. But the question is, where do we want the friction?
Right.
Do we want the friction in what happens 80 to 98% of the time, or do we want the friction to where it happens 2% of the time? Which, by the way, one of the reasons that we want the friction is if the exit criteria are important, and if they're not important, they should not be exit criteria.
Right.
Right. But if the exit criteria are important, then there should not be a lot of exceptions. And sometimes the reason that I'm a rep that I ask for an exception is I feel like, hey, this thing's really good. It's really strong. They seem really interested. I want to make a proposal. But we haven't, had the conversation with the financial stakeholder. Right. And you know what, sometimes you're not going to be able to get that person. But if I can just quote unquote make an exception with no friction, then it's very possible that because I want to move it forward, I'm going to build the case that the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and you're going to have that, and the whole reason that we said it was important, right? And so you actually want friction there because,
right,
we're trying to influence behavior, et cetera. So if you're testing not in alignment with the choices that are being made, then you're back to building a Frankenstein system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why 70-80% of implementations fail.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about components, but I think you hit on most of them. So we want to have clear use cases and scenarios outlined that we're testing against. We want to have a clear brief, and I would even say checklist of items of what's being tested. That should include, go ahead.
So I think I think we need to talk about two types of UATs.
Okay.
So I think there's, for lack of a better word, a feature UAT and a use UAT.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
And so a feature UAT should absolutely have a checklist. Alrighty, so we've just built the telephony integration.
Yep.
Okay, so we want to test what's the call quality. We want to test what's the logging. We want to test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ching, 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 ching. Does the feature work as the feature is supposed to work?
Yep.
Deal profile. We want to, yep. Okay. Do I have what I'm supposed to have?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And by the way, if you watch pilots in a cockpit, they go through a checklist.
Yep.
But they don't go through a checklist individually.
No.
They go through a checklist together.
Right.
Right. Check, yes, yes. Check, yes, yes. Right. So
Yeah.
Right. So in essence, the QAT should be doing the UAT. And then the user does the UAT. Right. And again, because it is two different viewpoints.
Yep. So you said that you think you should have a checklist for the feature build, but do you not think that you should for the usage?
So yeah, you're probably going to have a checklist. Again, to me, it's the use case. It's the scenario. So you should probably, actually, what I got to think about this. I think that on the back end, you probably want to have a checklist, but that's as much the checklist for what you're building. So here's the use case, right? So you stop and you go, okay, it needs to have this function, this function, this function, this function. I think when the user tests it, if you give them a checklist, the problem is they're not using it, they're checking it. And so I'm falling in the camp of, okay, here's use case 1, test it. Here's use case 2, test it. Because that's where, the point of the user testing is, does this work how they work it? Because some of what you're going to learn, and again, especially in the types of things we're talking about, CRM implementation, marketing automation, platform implementation, you might find the issue is a configuration design setup issue. You might find it's a training issue. You might find it's a choice issue.
Yeah.
Right. Because one of the choices that you're going to make is, how much do you show on the in your primary screen real estate? Right.
Yeah.
And I see people continuously make the mistake of too little or too much. Right. Because they haven't defined what is just right. They haven't defined what the scenarios are. And what it does then is it opens up, well, what this person's needs and what this person needs are different. Oh, okay, I get it. And here's where, we want to keep it simple. Right? We want to keep it simple, Jess. All we need is. That's 4 words, right? All we need is, right? The four words of project death.
Yep.
The 4 words of technology death. All we need is. And so what they do, I see this in Salesforce instances, Zohos, HubSpots, to map out and configure, okay, well, this type of person needs to look at this. This type of person in this scenario needs to look at this.
Right.
To build the conditionality. And you know what? 5% of the time we need to look at something else. And by the way, I get, if you go into, the feature that I like the absolute least as a user, as opposed to an ops person, is HubSpot's view all properties.
Oh,
the only time view all properties has any real benefit, in my opinion, is when I'm diagnosing something because I need to be able to see everything.
So again, as a RevOps person, I love it. And also so on the flip side of that, as a RevOps person, I hate that everybody can access it because it wreaks havoc with users frequently.
Well, and I would say that as a RevOps person, you love it, but as a user, you hate it. So when you're using
as a user,
the tool,
I hate it too.
and you have to, and when you find yourself that you have to go there,
yeah,
right. And so that's where we use HubSpot's playbooks feature.
Right.
Right. Is we create those contextual elements so I can get access to that when I need it, without having to go into no man's land and, with a machete to cut through the. But again, if I give it to somebody and they say, well, it doesn't have this information.
Yeah.
Right. What that's actually testing is, okay, we made this choice.
Right.
That this is what mattered. Right. And so, it opens up a question to be answered. Right. And there's a bunch of different ways to handle that. So circling back to what the question actually was. So no, I don't think when you go to UAT on the use testing,
mm-hmm.
I don't think you have a checklist. I think you have a clear use case.
So even if you've got somebody who's testing, and we run into this frequently, where they're not familiar with the technology or a CRM at all, like you still wouldn't give them a checklist. Like how do you kind of direct them on what the things are they're supposed to be doing if you don't give them a checklist?
Well, you have to provide some. You can't do user acceptance testing if you don't understand.
Right. So I get that. So the way we've handled it is with a video and like walking through the use case.
So we do a system. We do a system walkthrough.
We do a system walkthrough, which is a video. Yep.
Well, we could, but we do system walkthrough sometimes live. The delivery method to me is secondary.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. But wouldn't you also do a checklist to kind of help enable that, or do you not think that providing a checklist along with the system review kind of helps provide that direction?
I guess I need to know what the checklist is.
So it would be like create contacts, create company. You hit on some of them really. Advanced lead, confirmed deal gets auto created.
And then what would the use case be?
Well, I bounced around on a couple of things there. So the use case would be new account I'm working. Okay. Doing the initial outreach. So a new account, I've become aware of a new account. I'm reaching out. I advance that to create a sales opportunity. So I would have a checklist of creating the account, placing the phone call, sending an email for initial outreach, advancing the lead.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is laying out the actions. Yeah.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't think it's mandatory. I think that it's contextual to who are you using. So let's say that we've done an enhancement on something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So someone's been using the system. They know how to do it. They've got
okay. Yeah. Okay. I gotcha. Right?
If I'm launching a feature, I'm going to have a checklist. This is what we're checking.
Right.
Because these are the specs of the feature.
Sure.
Because again, the thing is, if I tell you what to do.
Oh, it's a fine line.
Yeah. I'm not learning. I do think that there needs to be some training. I think that so much tech training, and by the way, I love the people at my company, Jess. I love the people here at Imagine. I just want you to know that. And I think we do stuff as just about as well as anybody when it comes to implementation, and most of it better. The part of what we do right now that I hate the most, I hate how we train. Sorry, Sammy, I love you. I respect you. I think you're doing a great job. This is not at all. Too much training.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the reason that Sammy is training the way she's training is partially because of some of what I'm going to talk about, right? We're not in a position to be able to do other things.
Right.
But, Jess, I believe that an employee manual
Oh boy.
should only have 2 items in it.
You and I have Brene Brown would say we've rumbled on this several times.
And I think the first policy is be an adult.
Be an adult.
And the second policy is don't be a dick.
Yep. That is in our employee manual along with other things.
But I think if those 2 were taken seriously, you wouldn't need anything else. That's my take.
I understand that's your take.
I'm not this is not actually about our employee manual.
I know it's not.
So much time is spent training in rote training, right? We do not need a live person to train you on how to, right?
I agree.
So one of the things is I think that training begins before you use the system. I think training begins before the quote unquote official training. And so certainly if I like the problem I have with create a contact, create a company, create a, and I get why we need to do it, right? I get, but it's like, okay, if you're really not qualified to UAT this because there's a lack of proficiency. And by the way, we're not like, if we find there's a problem, we don't know that it's a training problem,
right?
If you haven't been trained on it yet, right?
Yep.
And so, like, if you have no technical proficiency, if you have never used a CRM,
yep,
you should not be the person UATing a new CRM implementation, right? Sorry, that's before UATing, there needs to be some training so that there's an understanding. Because and by the way, in fairness, if I've not used a multi-object system, or even if I'm using Salesforce, because the way Salesforce lays out multiple objects, is distinctly different than how HubSpot lays it out. And I actually like HubSpot's layout better because it creates greater clarity, and I can get into performance items. I think you actually perform better with it. Now, I think especially in the beginning, there isn't. It's one of the places where Salesforce is easier, but all of a sudden, I think I've updated something somewhere and I haven't in Salesforce because I really wasn't in the right. I thought I was. I put it in the contact record. No, you didn't. Right. So kind of as if I've never done those things, then there needs to be a familiarization element and how it's going to work. And that's where, it's also why I'm a believer in 2 system walkthroughs. So it's like my fundamental problem with the vast majority of tech training that I see is it's training by demo.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hard thing not to fall into, right? Because that's
and I've seen good training that's really good user demoing.
Yeah.
Right. But
that's my training. I'm kidding.
So like where we should be together and live and have somebody who has expertise, who's the trainer, should be facilitating conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talking about, okay, now let's talk about, the swoosh at the end that brings us all home. Here, let's show you some of the keys and the secrets and how. And so we're actually using the system rather than watching the system. And so, like, I think a system 1 walkthrough should be, a highly configured demo, not fully built, of here's your instance so that you can understand how it's supposed to work, that kicks off the first phase of training. System walkthrough 2 is, okay, this is, system walkthrough 2 should be the beginning of UAT, which is, okay, we're going to take you through our UAT.
Okay.
Right. That's in essence what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so that should create the familiarization. Okay, now you go, because by the way, we would find, if we were implementing this for us, and you're going to get mad at me in a second, but don't walk away. If we were if we were implementing this for us and we were to implement a UAT,
Mm-hmm.
one of our solves to enable associations,
Mm-hmm.
right? We would have gone through and one of the people highly qualified to UAT would have the UAT would have failed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. So thinking about this, I realized that we should move the action button, right? Because we have it at the bottom of.
Yep.
And if we really wanted to make it happen, you know what we could do?
What's that?
So we have an automation so that if you have like we have so in our project management element, everybody, we have a project, we have the components of the project or a program. It could be a project or a program. We have the components of it, and then we have the individual elements of it. Right. And to have everything work, we want to have the associations correct also to the company so that we can, have a clear picture of what's going on. And so one of the things that we, what we saw is when I was creating an action that would often get created and it wouldn't be associated properly.
Yeah.
Because by the way, doing that manually was a pain in the ass. And so what we did is we actually pulled from what we've been doing on the sales side for a long time. And we said, wait a second, I shouldn't have to make the component manually. I should be able to just click something and it makes the component, right? And now it automatically builds in the association. And so what if in the record creation, we had a property at the top that said confirm the right object. I don't know what the right term is. Right. Now, by the way, if the record were created through automation, which we all agree is how we want it to be created. Right. You wouldn't need to worry about it. Right. And if I'm going to create a record, let's say I'm going to create a record that doesn't need to be associated for some reason. It's as simple as just, yes. And you go through, right? Right. And again, where would most people put it? They put it at the bottom. Well, you might UAT that. Right. Because that's where we would naturally put it. Name of the of the initiative, this, who needs to do, who's assigned to this. Yep. Oh yeah, we should do a confirmation, right? So someone UATs that. And by the way, this is where the person designing it goes through QA. Yep, everything works. This is great.
Because we know where the field is, so we go. Right. Yeah, we go to it.
Well, but we also know that we're testing because we built it. Right. We know that we're. So then the user comes in and goes, you know what I found frustrating? Is I went in to create something and I had filled everything in, and then at the bottom I realized, shit, I'm not supposed to do this here. Right. Yeah. Right. And so that was frustrating. Or, you know what, by that point, I went ahead and put yes, because I was already there. I had to get on to the next thing. Right. So that would have come out in UAT. I mean, go, okay, that's failing UAT. Right. Now again, remember, if we give you this checklist, you won't do that. So now you see that happen, and then I go, oh, you know what we should do? That should be the first property. Right. Because now I go and create a record and I go, oh shit, boom. I haven't done anything. Right. Yeah. So that's an example of how usage UAT should be. Yep. What do you think of that, Jessica?
I think it's a good point, Douglas.
That was some good shit, wasn't it?
It was good.
Was good. Shit.
Was good. The other thing, Marissa Tomei in my ear always throws me off. So the other thing I want to kind of highlight that you touched on that I think is key to like a successful UAT QAT is making sure you include in that brief what complete is, because I think there's this we're gonna UAT. And the system's going to be perfect. And that's not really the goal here. The goal is to get it through whatever you outlined as complete, like you said, the target date, because then you're in a never-ending project mode. So there is this tendency, we get into UAT, we go through like 20 iterations, we're now making adjustments, we're not doing bug fixes. And it just goes on forever and ever. Amen, because we're trying to make the system perfect.
Right. That is So here's an example. Okay.
Mhm.
In building the system initially, you lay things out, this gets done, and you notice that everything's not associating, or the association's a pain.
Right.
Okay. But that wasn't spec'd.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
that is an iteration that goes, okay, when we're done with this launch, when we're done with this complete, that's an enhancement.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's an example of, yep, great observation. If we didn't have stuff to improve going next, then we knew we did something wrong. As opposed to, I did this, it was really frustrating, and what we're talking about is moving a property from the bottom of
Right.
the create to the top. Right. That's not technically a bug fix.
Right. But
it's such a small tweak that
right.
it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I did the automation and it's missing this connection. Then we go in and we go, okay, wait, why is that happening?
Right.
Oh, I realize that's because of this over here. That's fixing a bug because it's not hitting its spec. Right. So like, we could, we could make this even more streamlined. That's an enhancement. That's a feature request. We could.
Yep.
Right. Or hey, it would be great if someone had this, but then they didn't have access to that. Okay, well, to do that, we have to plot it out, figure out. So yeah, let's put that on as an item for consideration. We'll prioritize that, because that's the other thing too. When you get into this type of testing, you just notice improvements.
Yeah.
I can improve this, I can improve this, I can improve this, I can improve
Right.
this. There's no prioritization schema. So everything has equal priority.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, what happens here is urgency becomes the driver of, and you start running around in circles and get further and further away from where you want to be.
Well, and I would also argue that loudest voice is going to win in that scenario as well. So whoever's the squeakiest wheel, whoever is the most annoying, for lack of a better descriptor, that's always going to be kind of what you jump on and fix. All right. So last thing I wanted to kind of get your take on. So you hit on 2 system walkthroughs, system 1, system 2, but when we're thinking about UAT, how many iterations, and I realize this is likely situational, so it could change, but as a rule, how many iterations would you do through UAT? Would you do just one UAT?
I don't understand the question.
So like, we have a user go in and do UAT. We get feedback on that. We make those fixes. Would you then have the user go back in, and if you have more feedback, continue to fix? Or like
well,
how do you know how much bouncing back and forth? Because that is, go ahead.
So I think the danger is that you can fall into enhancement mode there. So
yep.
You do UAT. UAT passes or fails.
Okay.
If it fails, what failed?
Okay.
Okay. Then there should be an agreement that yes, that is a fail.
Mm-hmm.
And again, is that a fail that needs to be stopped and fixed? Is that a fail?
Right.
The electrical wiring isn't down to the basement yet. No, that's not a punch list item. We're not closing on the house until that's there. Right.
Right.
The last piece of drywall isn't on the hasn't been painted the same color, or
right.
isn't on, in the basement over there. Okay, that's a punch list item.
Right.
Right. We're not going to not move in, but in identifying the fail,
mm-hmm.
you have to define, well, what failed?
Right.
All right. What's the fix? Right. So if we define the fix and then we QAT it correctly, then it should go back to, like, I'm totally down with, yes, it needs to work for me. Now if you go in and you just do it some other way completely, then okay. Right. So
yeah,
I mean, I can't say how many iterations, because what I would say is it needs to do it until it passes.
Okay.
But UAT is not just a blind go in, like, and that's where we ran into problems in the past. Hey,
go in 100%. Yeah.
Go in and break it, right? Well,
yeah.
then we start talking about things that weren't even part of the project.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Well, the problem is my ERP the orders aren't fitting into my ERP. Oh, you didn't, a month ago, you told us you didn't have an ERP. Right? Okay, that's a slight exaggeration.
Yeah.
So I can tell you where UATs get bogged down and where they become disaster zones.
Okay.
And that is the lack of spec, lack of brief. Bad spec, bad brief. If the spec or brief is ambiguous, your UAT is going to be horrible. Your UAT experience is going to be horrible. You know, it's a new mantra here, Jess. People here are going to be sicker of hearing it than the prime directive. By the way, we have people quoting the prime directive, like people outside of Imagine quoting the prime directive. It's very cool.
I know. I've noticed.
But brief then build.
Yeah, brief then build.
Brief then build. Brief then build. The mistake is we UAT. Oh, here's a mistake, and then we jump in and we fix it.
Yeah, that's my battle. That's been my battle cry as of late. Brief then build.
Blue work, brief, build.
Yep. There you go. The 3 B's.
See, and you thought BBB stood for Better Business Bureau. It stands for Blue Work, Brief, Build. Exactly.
All right, cool. I have a couple of key takeaways. So UAT is defined scenario testing. It's not going in and breaking it, which I think is how we used to do it. And making sure you've got those use cases and scenarios super clear.
And I might be okay saying break the scenario.
Yeah. Oh,
like, here's the scenario. Find where it doesn't work.
Well, we used to tell them just go in the system and break it. We didn't, so that's where it gets crazy. Make sure that you define clearly what failed, define the fix, and that's what you're rechecking and retesting. And I think being able to delineate between an adjustment and fix, like that's where you totally get off the rails. Is this a bug fix or is this a full adjustment to what we originally thought out to do?
And I think you missed the biggest takeaway.
What was that?
It's why fixing this is so damn hard, right? When it's not working the way you want it to, when your UAT is not working the way you want it to, why it's so damn hard? Because the number one takeaway is map the build. It's the build spec, right? Yeah. And so the problem at UAT is the beginning. And so it's, 100 things have happened. Time has passed. You've dealt with a million things, because in that map, what we call the build map or the build roadmap, that's where the choices are articulated. That's where the strategy is. Strategy, guiding policy, diagnosis of the issue, guiding policy, key actions. So that's where your prioritization schema is. That's where your trade-offs are ideated. So what you do in the beginning is you're working really hard to have a top-down implementation.
Yep.
But as you start working with the tech, and remember, one of the things I talk about is that the superpower of CRM and tech in general is it finds its way into the driver's seat. Yeah. And the reason is you start talking about the tech. The tech is the most dynamic element of it. Yeah. Right. It's before you know it, where you started looking at it through the lens of the business process, you end up looking at the business process through the lens of the tech, and you don't even realize you're doing that. And the issue is, if you're finding that UAT being bumpy, well, see, you can't actually build a good UAT brief if you don't have a good build map. Yeah. But see, you have a good build map and you're at UAT because you're like, especially as the product, okay, we're almost done here, right? So we kind of, right?
That's so how I feel, though. I mean, it's accurate. Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes it's the hard conversation, because guess what? To the people that are hiring people like us, we'll build whatever the hell you want us to build. Yeah. Right.
I know.
You just pay for it.
Yep.
Right. And so if we've paid X, we've allocated the resources here, we defined this, right? Sometimes there's the hard conversation of, you know what? I understand that you want that. And that's why we're really careful about the promises we make up front. That's why, some people tell us we make it harder for people to buy from us than we should. And it's because I'm like, look, one of the things you're going to love, and it's a mistake that we make. I might actually take the SLC out of it. I might just make it, or SEL. I might just make it SC, because one of the things that happens, especially when you're doing a new launch, Oh, you're going to love it. You're going to be so happy. Well, if you could go back in time and see what you had through the lens of where you are now, that's probably true.
Yeah.
But the problem is you become aware of everything wrong with your business processes. You become aware of the choices. You're not 100% sure if you so by the time you launch, you're so deep in the complexity that your head wants to explode. There's not a lot. I mean, you every time you get better.
Yep.
You learn more of what you don't know. You learn more about what's not right. And so you're 10 times better because you feel worse.
Yep. I know that's the case.
And so if you don't have that strong brief, well, now you're in, now you're arguing customer experience.
Yep. 100%. And I think that's
my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. And I think that's a great takeaway. I think that's a great takeaway.
You know what, Jess? I think the word you were looking for, that's a brilliant takeaway.
I didn't say that. Not gonna say it.
That's what they're saying about this episode, Jess.
Is that what they're saying?
Right? Because if you don't have a good build mat, do you know what the outcome is?
What? On that note.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. Nothing serious about my takeaway, but I'll always remember that UAT and QAT rhyme, and that you can't have Q without the U. So if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and share the episode. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about the UAT/QAT process or anything else RevOps related, email me at hannah@imaginellc.com or hit us up on Twitter @demandcreator. Until next time, remember, you can't solve your upstream problems downstream.